The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hey everybody, thank you for joining us today. We're going to get started a couple minutes after just to let a few more folks hop on. So glad you are joining us and talk to you in a few minutes. Should probably, get some Jeopardy music on or something. Yeah, that's right. Fabulous. Yep. Thanks everyone for joining again. We'll be starting at 2 past the hour. In the meantime, if you guys want to test out the question functionality, feel free to ask a question in the question box, and let's go with how many years have you been using Eloqua? So type in your question or tell us how many years, just to see who we have on the line. Uh-oh.
It has to be under 20 years, by the way.
Right, exactly. Oh man, already started off with a typo. Not good. Okay, we're good. We're fine. Alrighty, we're gonna go ahead and get started. Again, thank you everyone for joining us. My name is Majda Anwar. I'm the Director of Marketing at the Pedowitz Group, and I am thrilled to introduce two of our Eloqua experts, Bill Hooven and Stephanie Pence. A couple of housekeeping things, organization, before we get started. If you guys have questions during the webinar, feel free to ask in the question area. I will be monitoring that for the presenters. Just let us know, like if you can't hear anything or if somebody went blank. Technology just loves to run very smoothly during these things. So if anything like that happens, let us know. Otherwise, I'm very excited to hand this off to Bill and Steph. Go ahead.
Thank you, Majda. All right.
Perfect. I'll hop in here, Bill. So just to go over very briefly for you guys, our agenda, what to expect really out of this next, 40 minutes or so we have together. We are going to do just kind of a quick intro. That way you know who Bill is, who I am, a little bit of history about us. And then we're going to talk just really briefly around some of the nuances or some of the differences really between the type of integration you might be used to, right? Utilizing that native or the program builder style integration compared to the new cloud app and some of the really cool key features and things that you gain when using this. And then we're going to talk through just a couple things to consider. So as you're working through, does this migration make sense for you guys to start now? What type of migration should we start to do? Things that you guys as an organization should really consider as part of this project. And then even some key things kind of to watch out for. And then we're going to talk through, if you guys saw our blog post, there was that sample kind of like migration or switchover plan. And so we're just going to walk through that just a little bit of what it takes to actually start this migration. And then of course at the end we'll leave some time for just some question and answers. Any comments that you guys have, make sure that we are able to share those with the group and then have just a really quick wrap up. Awesome, so just a little bit about who we are here at the Pedowitz Group. So we are actually a fully remote organization, which is kind of fun. So we span across 21 states here. So we have people in Georgia, we have people in the West Coast, East Coast, literally every time zone is represented with our company. And there are roughly about 70 of us spread across the US, which is kind of really fun and cool. We've been in business now over 13 years as an organization, And during that time, we have had so many clients, you see over 1,300, doing various things. It could be integrations, migrations, it could be campaign support, you name it, we've definitely done it. Just a little quick snap at our experience with Oracle in particular. So we have had over 500 plus Oracle Eloqua customers. We've been a partner of the year before with Oracle. Of our customers, we've had actually 18 of them win Marquee Awards over the years, which if you guys are familiar, those are the big awards that Oracle Eloqua gives out every single year at their big conference. Well, pre-COVID at their big conference.
Yeah.
We do have yes. We do have a lot of certifications from luminaries when that was a thing, to all the different master certifications that are now available. And then even a handful of us are implementation specialists. Just a few kind of notable clients that we've had over the years as well. Some of them you probably recognize. But you will notice we work with both B2B customers as well as B2C customers as well. Awesome, a little bit about me. So as Majda mentioned, I am Stephanie Pence, and I actually am a manager of our customer operations, and I run actually our Oracle Eloqua practice here at the Pedowitz Group. So I've been here with TPG now a little over 6 years. March was my 6-year anniversary. And I am actually located here in the Austin, Texas area, where if you are familiar, we're still in the 90 degrees. So we have not quite hit fall or winter or any of those other seasons yet, but that's okay. Some of the things that I specialize in really are going to be around integrations, all things considered about lead management, any kind of digital transformation efforts. And a really kind of fun fact about me is I love doing things with my hands. So I am a DIY geek. So oftentimes for fun, you will find me doing projects all the time, and just moved into a brand new house. So it's a whole new canvas and I love it.
That's awesome.
And I'm Bill Hooven. I have a show and tell item here to show you. I hope I can do that without stabbing myself. Bill Hooven, I am also, I'm a director of customer operations and enterprise technology, also with the Pedowitz Group, obviously. Been here since pretty much the beginning of the company when Jeff started it over 13 years ago or so. In fact, I was just, as we were preparing for this webinar, I came across this pin. I don't know if you can see, but these are the early Ella King, yeah.
That's like OG Eloqua reference.
They gave these out many years ago when you were learning Eloqua. You were either an Ella King or Ella Queen. Of course, no, this will not be available on eBay later. But I also have multiple certifications in multiple technologies. Represent multiple CRMs, multiple platforms, but have the most experience with Eloqua. And my fun fact is that my wife and I have a small horse ranch here in East Tennessee, really close to the Smoky Mountains over on Eastern time. So, all right. So what is the issue? What's the big deal? Why are we here today? I'm sure you probably know, or you wouldn't have signed up for this webinar, but Oracle is ending support for Eloqua's native program builder integration. And that's going to happen on February 1st. Now, that doesn't mean that your integration is going to stop on February 1st. It just means that the support is ending. But if you read the, and we have this deck available. There is a link actually there that will link to Eloqua's announcement or Oracle's announcement about this. But the most concerning thing I think that they have in that announcement is that future releases may cause that integration, those early integrations, to cease to function correctly without warning. That keeps me up at night, just the thought of that, coming into work one day and finding out that suddenly my leads, and contacts don't make it into Salesforce, my updates, and the data's not making it back and forth. And who knows what the issue would be and how you could resolve it. The resolution might be that you have to move to the the new app anyway, and you'll eventually be forced to do that. So that's really why we're pushing this so hard right now, is we want to make sure that everybody has enough time to make the migration before this support ends in February.
And hey, Bill, just to add to that, those of you that may have multiple CRMs, I've had a client already know that their field mapping changed, right? And so they tried to go and update it. And by just updating it, it broke the integration. And Oracle support said, well, you have a multiple CRM integration. We already no longer support that. So you're going to have to migrate over to the cloud app. So just something to be aware of. It could be something as simple as field mapping updates that break your integration.
Yeah, that's a great point, Stephanie. Yeah, we've worked on a lot of those multiple integration scenarios. So this, again, is why we're really trying to push this hard right now to make sure everyone's prepared. There is a companion blog post that Stephanie and I wrote over on the Pedowitz group blog. We'll, in fact, I think, Majda, if you don't mind posting this in the chat window, this is a good companion piece to what we're talking about today. We go into a lot of detail and have a lot more screenshots for some of the things we're going to talk about today. So I'd encourage you to check that out. And of course, if you have questions, if there's any way we can help, please do let us know. So let's jump in and take a look at the old method versus the new method. From a high level, if you're familiar with the old integration, you're used to seeing what we're showing here on the left-hand side of this this slide. This is what will eventually lose support here in February of this next year coming up. On the left-hand side is that native integration. This isn't the program builder part, but this is part of the integration. And on the right-hand side is the integration app that is replacing it. I want to point out that the integration app is actually an Oracle app, so it's not a third-party app or anything like that. It is an official built and supported app. And one of the things, Stephanie and I have been through several of these integrations now, and we've been working on them for probably going on a couple of years because there was a pre-release version. And I have to say, from our experience, the integrations, it's much more pleasant to work with the integration app. So I think there's definitely an upside to this once you get through the hassle of having to do a migration. But there are a lot of advantages, and we'll look at some of those advantages here in another couple of slides. But this is kind of what it looks like on the right-hand side. The other part of that, of course, is, besides all the settings in the background, is the logic. And on the left-hand side is the familiar program builder logic for a typical Salesforce integration. This is this method will not really be supported anymore. So everything is moving over to Program Canvas, which is what you're seeing on the right-hand side. If you've not been in Program Canvas before, it's similar to Campaign Canvas. And I think that this is, I'm going to say this unofficially, but I think that you're going to probably see support for Program Builder eventually go away. We don't have any official word from Oracle on that. I'm just saying that that seems to be the trend. Everything's moving to the Program Canvas, and there's some great advantages there. But one of the neatest advantages is, even in the very design, you have a lot of flexibility. If you look at what's on the right, if you're familiar with Program Canvas, some of you are probably saying, well, I would have built that in a horizontal flow instead of a vertical. Sure, whatever, do what you want, because you're not restricted in really how you design this. You can drag and drop all of those icons anywhere, and there are a lot of actions and decision rules available for that canvas. So really exciting. If we look at some of the advantages that you're going to get over over the old method moving to the new method, one is obviously Oracle support. This is kind of a given because that they're going to support their new app. But I will say that in addition to what may seem like a given, Oracle is also, we've noticed them being more active in the integration app. Even the latest 20D release that they just talked about in a partner webinar that we were attending this week, pretty much every release they're announcing some kind of modification or improvement to the integration app. So that's not something I saw as often with the old integration method. So I'm really excited to see them putting a lot of effort into that.
The other thing I would add, the other thing I'd add to that, Bill, is even on Topliners. So if any of you aren't on Topliners, that's of course Oracle's free online community for all of the Eloqua and all of their products really. But even just this week, I was posting something about this integration on Topliners, and I had a couple people from Oracle itself actually reach out and offer like to private message with them about any questions and that type of thing. So they're really being there to help support as much as possible around this effort.
Yeah, definitely. I've noticed that as well. So they seem all in on this, and I'm really excited about that. And along with that is the improved documentation. If you've done the if you built old integrations, you're probably relying a lot on documentation that was done a long time ago. In fact, some of it doesn't even apply anymore due to changes and things that have happened over the years. But this new documentation, I noticed them keeping it more up to date as things change, and that's a welcome sign that they're going to really support this moving forward. I am saying that there is an ease of use for marketers. What I'm not saying here is that integrations are easy. Integrations can still be complex and complicated, but I think that the way that this integration app and program canvas work are much more logical for marketers. So it's much closer to what you might do as part of a campaign design and things like that. So even how the app is set up is just more intuitive, I think, than the old integration. So generally, you may not need an engineering degree to work on your integration, thankfully. But probably one of the best benefits is this one, the speed to lead. If you have an old integration active right now, you know that the delay from getting a lead from Salesforce, from Eloqua over to Salesforce, well, it depends on your setup, but it could be 30 minutes. In some cases, Stephanie, I think you have one that could take up to 4 hours using the program builder method.
And who knows, right? Like when it comes to choosing like the program run mode, I don't know about anybody else, but that was always so confusing to me. Like which option do I choose? How do I get the best out of this program? So the speed to lead takes that out of the way to all that guesswork, and it really just does it in near real time for you.
Yeah, which 5 programs are you going to pick for priority mode, and
Right.
those kinds of things. So that's no longer an issue. With Program Canvas, you can get leads from Eloqua over to Salesforce really in a matter of as quick as seconds. And this is much better for the sales team to be able to get marketing qualified leads and such over to Salesforce very quickly. So really excited about that. Even the data import speed has been improved. With the auto syncs, it could take 30 minutes or longer to pull the data and bring it over from Salesforce, but the data import speed on the new integration app is as fast as every 15 minutes. So that's certainly a welcome change as well. Speed, we love speed. Let's do it faster. Email address changes, as you probably know, with the old integration. If you change the email address of a lead or a contact in Salesforce, it would probably result in a duplicate contact being created in Eloqua, and that is something that was always a hassle to deal with. Well, the new integration app provides an ability to really try to map that old Eloqua contact to the new email address. And the beauty of that is you don't lose all that activity history and the lead score changes and all of that stuff, and you don't have duplicates, which really is one of the hassles of marketing automation sometimes.
And this requires no changes on the Salesforce side. So I think that's a big win. The workaround historically has been we needed to add another field, right? And then add a workflow role on the Salesforce side to copy these over and add a flag and all of these things. And so this right here is huge. And we've tested this out. This was actually just released in, I think, the last release or the one prior. And Bill and I, we've already tested it and we love this. It's amazing.
It's nice. It's really nice. So you can tell a lot of development thought went into Oracle's development of this app. The inbound filter criteria for data coming from Salesforce into Eloqua has been improved. You used to have in fact, I have a screenshot in the next slide, but you used to have a finite number of filters, and there's a better way to do it. I'll show you in a minute. And then also there are improved troubleshooting capabilities. Try as we might to get everything right, every once in a while, something's going to go wrong. The API is going to be down, or someone's going to change a pick list value in a drop-down, a select list in a field in Salesforce that isn't reflected in Eloqua. All these things sometimes happen. So we always end up having to troubleshoot. And I think that the new integration app is a lot easier to troubleshoot some of the integration errors that we experience. I have a few screenshots on that one as well.
Hey, Bill, we've got a great question that just came
Sure.
in. And the question is, do you have concerns about stuck records on app steps? So for instance, creator update lead, we've seen a lot of stuck records in other app steps like contact washing machine, form submit, etc. So have you guys seen that in this app?
Was it stuck, S-T-U-C-K?
S-T-U-C-K, correct, yes.
Got it, okay. Yeah, I would say in my experience, Stephanie, you certainly feel free to chime in, but in my experience, I have not seen this be an issue with the integration app. But I have had that same issue, yes, with some of the native integrations. Stephanie, what have you experienced?
Yep, I would say I haven't seen them stuck, and part of that is, I think, honestly, the way that we design it, Bill, right? When it comes to routing based on errors. One of the cool things I know, Corey, that is coming out in the next release that they just mentioned is really the ability for the app to retry, right? So when these leads do fail or if they get stuck, right? As you're mentioning, the new app is going to have functionality to be able to retry it a couple times over a certain time frame. So that's going to help a lot with this. I will say, even with the contact washing machine cloud app, I've seen major improvements. I would say over the last 6 months there too, and seen actually a decrease in number of leads that get stuck, even in that cloud app. But I'm with you, like there has been some hesitation in the past when using some of these cloud apps.
Oh yeah.
Great question.
Thanks for that. So yeah, and if you have a question, please do put it in the chat window, and Mash will grab that, and we'll be certain to address it. So this is the old method. If you've seen the inbound filter criteria and the old integration method, this is what it looks like. Sorry, I know that's kind of a small screenshot, but you have a list of fields, and you can change the operator and such. But the new method looks like this, and it uses SOQL, an SOQL statement, which gives a tremendous amount of additional capabilities. In fact, you even have some capability to reference objects other than the one that you're importing from in your filter criteria. So this has been really huge for us to be able to really tailor what we want to come into Eloqua from Salesforce. And this has really been a game changer for us. And the SOQL is a fairly standard filter creation language, so query language. So I think that'll be a welcome change for many of you. And then we were just kind of talking about the error reporting and troubleshooting. Here are a few examples. In the upper left here, maybe you can see my mouse. In the upper left-hand side here is we typically, when we build an integration, we will often use some wait steps, and we'll build in troubleshooting steps along the way to try to catch these errors. This really helps us in troubleshooting. If you come in the next day and you see that there are people in a particular wait step, we know why they got there, because one part of the integration failed. On the bottom here with the graph is showing how the app actually has some integration reporting. This is being improved upon, by the way, in the 20D release. And Stephanie, you might have a few comments here, but they're going to allow some more grouping of some of the reporting. You can group objects together when you look at your integration reporting. But the neat thing is you can see throughout the day how the integration is working on a push and pull basis. And then if you have an error, like you see, there's red right here where my mouse is pointing. If there's a failure, it's a hyperlink. You click on the hyperlink, and then you'll see what the failure is, which is the next screenshot here on the far right. So in this case, something failed on a create lead call push out to Salesforce, and the reason was because the job function had a bad value, or it was null. I think in this case it was a bad value, but if it's null, Salesforce gave us that error. This is what the error code is. This is what it's telling us, and boom, we were able to figure that out. We of course backtracked to find out what form had the wrong value in it, and we fixed it, and we're able to move on. So just an example. Stephanie?
So actually,
no worries. I would just, yeah.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Steph. You're going to answer the question.
Yeah, no worries. I saw Lauren, your question. So Lauren's question is, we've experienced the token expiring in the cloud app which, as we know, right, causes it to stop working. And a lot of the apps requires it actually to be reinstalled. She's saying the Oracle support says that this is unavoidable and is asking if we figured out how to get notified when the app stops or needs to be reinstalled. It's really funny that you asked. We just actually experienced this not too long ago, Bill, I feel like, with one of our mutual clients. And I will say that this connector works a little bit different when it comes to this, in my experience, with some of the other cloud apps. So part of the setup for this is we have to actually install what is called a connective app on the Salesforce side. And so this is a slightly different type of connection than some of the other kind of cloud apps, whether it be with like our webinars, those other types of that require a login. I will say with this cloud app, we have experience. So if that token gets broken, right, say there's like a sandbox refresh, for example, and it resets the token and password, what happens with this app is it actually just queues up everything that hasn't been sent over yet. So even if your integration stops, it doesn't need to be reinstalled. You just have to update your token, which is great. So you keep all of your configurations. And then upon fixing that and your connection being live again, it's actually going to process everything that was in the queue for you. So we're not actually losing information, which I think is a huge win with this app.
Yeah, and another thing, some of our clients like to use the Operations Center feature of Eloqua, and we have set that up where integration errors would then go to Operations Center, so they can periodically look there and see if they're noticing anything queuing up, you know, if there's a problem there. And that helped some of my clients. It helps them be a little more proactive in checking this.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. So we're looking forward to some of the new updates coming as part of 20D to be able to provide some additional troubleshooting support. But already it's easier, in my experience, it's easier to troubleshoot integration problems with the app.
Yep. The nice thing also, I will say, with just the errors is we do have the ability to download, we can copy and paste, and it gives us a bit more granularity than I would say the native integration today does, which has been really helpful.
Yeah, good point. And if you notice on the right-hand side what Stephanie was talking about, there is a download all, so we can really, if you get a lot of errors, you could certainly download them and then scroll through them in Excel or something. And then there's also a copy button. If you do this, if you either download or click that little copy button, you'll actually get even more detail on what the error is. So that's really a handy feature as well. Yep, so good stuff. All right, well, there's some big things to consider going into this. Okay, you need to migrate to the integration app. So we have a list of a couple things we want to make sure that you consider when you're going into this project. One of them is testing. And I just want to mention that testing, I have some bullet points here, but testing, I want to start out by saying, takes considerable time and effort. And you don't want to underestimate this. This is one of the most common problems that we see going into a project like this. We want to make sure and have ample time built out. And Stephanie's going to talk about that when she gets into the project plan, the sample project plan, a little bit later in this presentation. But one consideration is sandboxes. Do you need a sandbox? Should you use a sandbox? And I would say that if you have a Salesforce sandbox, that would be great to be able to test your integration app with the Salesforce sandbox. But you don't need an Eloqua sandbox for this. And if you don't already have an Eloqua sandbox, that's okay, because the Eloqua sandbox work cannot be pushed to Eloqua production. It doesn't work like Salesforce and some of the other apps. So if you were to build it in an Eloqua sandbox, you'd have to rebuild it in the production instance anyway. And what we'll typically do is build a sandbox, a Salesforce sandbox, an integration with the Salesforce sandbox in production, and we'll use those filters that we were talking about, and have a few other tips that will help with that there. But this way we can test alongside production. While the native integration is working, we can be testing in the Salesforce integration in the same instance. And then if everything works okay, we can then clone the work that we've done and then put the production values in. So it saves a lot of time. If you're going to do that, to make testing be effective, you really should have test record criteria in place for email addresses and field values. And what I mean is, if it's a spreadsheet, you have a list of, these are all our test records, these are the values we're entering for each of the test values, so that when I go to verify in the CRM in Salesforce, I can verify that the values I entered actually did make it into Salesforce correctly. And you should test different values for your different test records. But you want to come up with a format, like use test company for the company name, we prefer to use that, but also an email domain that is specific. Something like, company.com.test or something like that. We will also use something in the email address domain that indicates what version of testing this is. Is it SIT? Is it UAT? We'll talk about that here in a second. And then use a document to track what made it in, because you probably will have a lot of test cases. You're going to be using filters, so you'll be using the SOQL filters to restrict that test audience. You probably will not want the integration app to import everything from Salesforce into your Eloqua instance yet. So you'll want to set some criteria to make sure it's only importing those test records. It's not difficult to do, but it's very important. And then I mentioned here that Eloqua has the ability to have a test configuration as part of the action. The action is like what the external call was in the old integration. We don't typically use it at the Pedowitz group because we're already doing end-to-end testing, and the testing of the action happens as part of that end-to-end testing. We have this process down very well, and so it's very efficient. We can move through it very quickly. But you do have the ability, if you wanted to, actually go in and test the action itself right from within the action. And if you're concerned about building your first action, maybe that's the right approach for you.
All right, we've got a question. Another question is, and it's around, do you have recommendations for testing the campaign-related actions and responses? So we're getting the gist that it's not the same as normal actions, and the campaign responses may require some changing. So what do you guys think about that?
Yeah, the campaign is a little trickier, isn't it? Because you have multiple components within Eloqua that have to be set in order that you be testing along with the Salesforce side. So campaign response rules, if you're using response rules, and then the last SFDC campaign ID field. It depends on how you're using Eloqua as part of that integration. But yes, we would definitely have that as one of our test cases to verify that. But we would also do an end-to-end test on campaigns. Absolutely, especially when it comes to response rules with the different campaign member statuses. Stephanie's going to talk here in a second about things to consider when you're planning this project, but one of those is, do you want to build a workaround right now so that when you create a campaign in Eloqua, it automatically creates campaigns in Salesforce with the appropriate campaign member status for that campaign type? I'll leave that with you to think about, but that's one of the options that you have available to you as part of this.
Just to add to that also, one thing that's important to note with the cloud app integration is it absolutely can be running alongside with your native integration at the same time. So oftentimes when we're testing specifically campaigns, right? So like you mentioned, Bill, depending on the type of integration for campaigns, if you have it set up that Eloqua creates campaigns in Salesforce, that type of thing, I personally tend to leave campaign testing when it comes to creating campaigns till the very end of testing. And the reason is, as you know, that is really a setting that's applicable to everything. So even in the cloud app, we can't really specify only these campaigns create in Sandbox. So it will create some duplicate campaigns in Salesforce. So I just always like to make sure and communicate with my Salesforce team, right, with my marketing team and my reporting, of course, use those naming conventions so that we can pull those out. And we know these were for testing and that these aren't actual campaigns. But my recommendation is always test it at the end when it comes to creating campaigns. But if it's campaign membership, those types of things, we absolutely build that in both our SIT and UAT testing end-to-end as part of it, just like if it was an actual real life lead going through the processing, what that experience would be.
It's a great point, Stephanie. Thank you. And then, of course, those test cases, you want to make sure that you plan for every scenario and that you're testing all of the Salesforce objects you're integrating with, including campaigns, as we just mentioned. So this will be documenting, that's part of this process really, is to meet with the stakeholders and document, lead conversion, and all of the lead to contact conversion and marketing qualified leads, what are the rules around that? At the Pedowitz group, we have a pool of test cases that we pull from, depending on what the client needs are, but you want to make sure and not leave anything out. And then your testing would be, you do component testing and then SIT and UAT. So component, you want to test every piece of it as you're creating it to make sure it seems to be functioning correctly. And then SIT, you do an end-to-end test for these test cases. And then UAT, of course, would be your user acceptance testing to make sure that your stakeholders also are seeing the same positive results.
Yep, and I think it's important also to,
oh,
go ahead, Matt.
I was just going to say, like, in hearing you guys kind of talk about this, like, and kind of getting like your business stakeholders aligned, do you guys think this move is an opportunity to maybe re-examine your entire lead management process? Like, it kind of sounds like that needs to be pretty strong in order to make a successful migration happen.
Maj, I love it. You're getting ahead of us. I love it.
I mean, I got excited.
I love it. I love it. The only other thing that I would just say on test cases, it's important to also purposely test things that are going to fail or things that aren't going to go through. So oftentimes we see customers will just be testing the positive outcome, but we know in real life, right, we don't want people to enter the integration. We don't want them to be sent over. So you want to make sure and account for those as well as the positive outcomes.
Yeah, great point, Stephanie. And this will take longer than you think it's going to take. And so this is one of the reasons why we wanted you to start this as early as you possibly can. If you test and you come across a problem, then you may have to re-engineer something or redesign something. Hopefully it'll be easy, but it may not be. So this may be something that you want to allow for a couple of weeks on. All right, Stephanie.
Yes, no worries. So Maja, as you were mentioning, right, now's the time. So let's take a look at our current integration and let's figure out, right, is now the right time? Does it make sense to look at things that are either pain points, right, that you guys ourselves are experiencing every day, or is this an opportunity to say, hey, we could be doing this better, right? So here's just kind of a couple, I would say probably 5 or 6 key areas that we tend to look at first as kind of a phase 1 approach when trying to determine what makes sense. So when it comes to reporting, right, everyone knows like money speaks, right? So what is your capabilities or your current reporting today when it comes to RAMI? Are there gaps in your reporting? Are there things that you guys could be doing a little bit better, right? Maybe this is the time to start looking at that and say, how can we solve that, right? What are things that we can do now? We touched on this one a lot around campaign member statuses, but if you're doing like attribution reporting in Salesforce, right, we know campaign membership is absolutely key. So making sure that we're sending over statuses, that we're updating them to the right statuses, those types of things is going to be really important. And oftentimes, the reason we have this one in particular is if you're using response rules, as Bill mentioned earlier, we've found that a lot of times they're not really working correctly. So you may or may not be aware of that, but as part of kind of uncovering what's going on, response rules absolutely can be used with the cloud app, and they function exactly the same way. But you'll notice when you start testing them again that they might not actually be working. Lead processing. So as Bill showed, right, the difference between our program builder and even like our program canvases, right, kind of the flow and the feel of how leads get in, what happens to them once they're in that flow. I would definitely challenge you guys, like, does the flow still make sense for you guys? Are there things in there that have been deprecated, right, that maybe we don't need anymore? Or even, are there things that we can maybe pull out of the integration and create like a system program, right? So how can we simplify or really optimize our actual integration flow? feeders for our integration, right? As part of this migration effort, you have to move everything, right? So now's a great time to look, are all of our forms that are feeding into our integration, are they still applicable? Should they be feeding into the integration, right? We have some sneaky marketers say, hey, I want this going in all the time. Okay, we all know what happens. Our email preference sync, so right, especially right now, that personal touch is more and more important, right? Our customers are doing research, right? They're doing so much more online now before we're even messing or communicating with them. So is this the right time to make sure that we're syncing our preferences with sales, right? And getting that information back so that we can truly personalize that experience with them. And then lastly, right, that feedback loop. So we're sending leads over to sales, but what are we getting back, right? How do we know if the leads are sending over are qualified, right? Do we know as a marketing organization when a lead is maybe sent to re-nurture, where to put them or what to do, right? Is this an opportunity where we can incorporate a bit more feedback from sales to enhance our integration?
So we've got another question in the chat window, which is, are there alternatives to using response rules?
The only really other alternative is utilizing the last SFDC campaign ID field. I will say one of the cons to doing that is that field constantly gets overwritten. So with response rules, there is going to be a queue, right? So if they take more than one response, it's going to actually only send over the highest priority response, right? So it's going to say if a form submit is higher priority than an email open, we're just going to send form submit over. With the other method, it's going to send over email open, and then it's going to send over email click, and then form submit. And if they happen to do another engagement with a different campaign, it's going to overwrite that field as opposed to queuing up. So you could get some kind of disjointed reporting when it comes to what they're actually doing. Bill, are there any other ways you've seen around response rules?
Yeah, you could, there's an app that could be used as well, but I'll be honest with you, response rules, over the years, I've seen a lot of people have problems with them. And honestly, I don't think it's been very well documented. And I think some of the problems that if you're having problems with it, some of the problems you may be having may just be something that could be overcome if it's set up a little differently. So I wouldn't totally give up on response rules yet, but there is an app workaround as well. Yeah.
Great. So I just wanted to make sure we're cognizant of time. So I think we've got some additional great information here. So I invite everybody. We are going to stay on to make sure that we grab all this information. If you can't stay with us, that's more than okay. We will be sending out the recording, but just wanted to let everybody know if you want to stay on and engage with us and ask more questions, you are more than welcome to.
Thank you, Majda. I'll try and speed it up just a little bit too. So we've talked a lot about things to consider, right? There's so many options, and to Majda's point earlier, what type of migration makes sense, right? Given the timeline, given maybe the challenges or things that are going on in your business, really we've kind of boiled this down to 3 different types of migration. So we have, of course, the simplest, which would just be kind of a lift and shift, right? We're going to take what we're doing today in Program Builder and external calls exactly how it is. We're just going to rebuild it, right? No changes, literally just going to lift and shift that. That, of course, is going to be a lower effort. I won't say it's going to be easy still, but right, that's going to be the least effort of doing that. We have some where maybe we want to take the chunk of what we're doing, right? It's working for the most part. Take that, and then maybe we just enhance a few things. So it could be around some campaign membership stuff, right? Or maybe even some additional data appendages, right? Maybe we haven't been capturing consistently lead source. So let's start capturing that a bit more consistently. And if it's blank, we can update it to a default value, right? Just to make sure marketing is getting some type of credit. So this is typically going to be some things that are done primarily, I would say, on the Eloqua side with as little effort or changes probably to the Salesforce side, just because we know the different Salesforce teams, of course, have their sprint cycles you have to take into consideration, right? And their like priorities, and it's not necessarily always going to line up with maybe your timeline for this migration. And then we have that final option, which is, okay, do we just completely redesign everything, right? Let's start fresh. Let's get in the room with sales. Let's have a conversation around, okay, who should we be sending over? At what point in time? What are the actions? What information do you need, right? What information do you not need? What do you want to send back to us, right? So this is really a complete overhaul of really your entire lead management, right? And what are you guys trying to achieve? You can tell that takes a little bit more effort. And this, we said 3 to 9 months. Absolutely, it's going to vary, right? Based on the complexity of your integration, the size of your organization, right? It could even vary on opinions of your stakeholders, right? Can we get that alignment? So lots of factors there to think about.
Yeah, and this, these, to Stephanie's point, I want to underline the ranges. You know, if your integration is simple, then this is probably 1 month, 2 month, 3 month, you know, for the different options. But if it's more complex, obviously it's closer to 3 months, 6 months, or 9 months. So yeah, it's a range, but all that goes back to that complexity.
So I have a question on that. So we've got what, 3 or 4 months before the switch over. So what if I'm sitting here going, hey, I really want to take advantage of this. I really want to be able to do some enhancements or redesigns. What would you tell that marketer or that operations person? How would you work that with the fact that you know a deadline's coming up?
Yep, I'll take that first, Bill. Really, it depends on a few things. Given the timeline, and let's be honest, holidays, and oftentimes, right, there's going to be code freezes at the end of the year, lots of kind of variable things. I would say, right, if your integration for the most part is working okay for you, right, you're able to get to what you need, a lift and shift, or even with a few small enhancements is what I would recommend first. And then while you're doing this, start to gather, okay, what additional enhancements do we want? What can we do as kind of a second phase of this, and treat it really as kind of an MVP, just to get it going, right? So that we can make sure that we can run both integrations at the same time in case something goes wrong with the new integration. We have something in place, and then we can work on further enhancing it to get it to where we want. Now, if it's completely not working, then I would say we're going to need to do a complete redesign. But I would say really spend some time prioritizing, like, what is a must-have versus a what is a nice to have, and then again do that phased approach as well.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it all goes back to
safety nets. You got some safety nets in place. Awesome.
Exactly.
Right. It all starts with the planning. Absolutely.
Great question, Majda.
Yeah. I was sitting there going, wait a minute, 1 + 2 + 3
it's not
February.
Very long.
Yeah, it's coming up.
Yeah. Don't put this off very long. It comes up fast.
All right, so now the nitty gritty, right? So how do we start planning this? What are the steps that we need to take? How do we start to talk about this with our, organization, those types of things? So I've kind of laid this out as simple as possible, just to make sure that you guys can be successful, right? So this is really a 5-step process. So that first process, or that first step, is let's define the scope, right? What are we going to try and achieve? What type of migration do we think makes the most sense for our organization right now? Do we have the resourcing, right? Let's make sure and just say, okay, we know we want everything under the sun, but what's realistic for us right now is maybe, 3/4 of the way to that. So let's just define that. Once we've defined our scope, I always like to identify those risks, right? What do we know that's coming up that could derail us from the success of this? Okay, and I'll show you some examples of things that could come up, especially given the timing of what we're dealing with. As a third step, what we like to do then is assign tasks and responsibilities. And you're going to see in this area, this step in your planning process, I guarantee you, will make or break if this migration is successful. So assigning people responsibility, who you need to collaborate with, how do we make sure this gets done, what is the timing of these things. So this is the part of the plan that probably takes the longest because it requires the most detail, but skipping this step, you will definitely have, I won't say you won't be successful, you'll have lower chances of this being successful.
You know, Steph, that reminds me of, you know, if Colby, our VP of customer experience, were here, she would say joint accountability is no accountability. So having those assignments and those tasks outlined is absolutely key. I just had to put in that quote because if Colby were here, she would absolutely say that.
Yep, she'd be so proud. Bill and I both actually report to Colby, so it's been ingrained in our heads. No doubt. Yes. And then change management. I would say this is probably the other big piece that often gets forgotten, especially as timelines get hurried up, right? And we're just get it out the door, right? But this change management piece is going to be so vital. Even if you're doing a lift and shift, there's still a few things that are going to be different, right? That we want to make sure that we're educating people on, that we're gaining feedback, and ultimately that we're communicating with your organization as well, right? You guys are doing a huge thing right here. You're going to be gaining monumental benefits just from doing this. Speed to lead, right? Talk about that with your organization. And then the last and final step is just identifying our timeline, right? So this could be a timeline for our overall project and then broken down into the different tasks and things so that, again, we can set those expectations. We make sure that we are planning backwards of when our go live date is to make sure we have plenty of time for testing. As Bill went over, it's going to take a lot of time. So if you plan out that full timeline now, you're going to be way more successful.
Yeah.
Awesome. And just to kind of go through, so this is that example project plan. So as a result of this webinar, you guys will get a copy of this. And it's also up on that blog post as well if you guys are just ready to go and just download this and start going. So that first step though, right, defining our project scope. I guess I should note, this is not an exhaustive list on all of these. This is really just to kind of get you guys going, get you guys started, and also kind of identify for you guys everything that needs to be thought about, right? Like it's not just integration. So documenting or reviewing your guys' current design, of course, is always going to be the first step. Discuss amongst yourselves, right? What is that migration type that's going to work best for us? Start to collect your use cases. So these use cases then become your test plan later on, right? So without these use cases, we don't know what the design should be of our integration, right? We don't know what we're trying to achieve or what the outcome should be. And then identifying any kind of key dates and deadlines. So do you have a major like online event coming up in January? That would be a really great go for an MVP of this, right? Let's see how those leads go through this. So if we can look and identify those dates ahead of time, it's going to help us then line up our timeline and everything else with that. And then most importantly, define what success looks like for this project, right? Does it mean that we have everything flowing in, you know, a matter of 5 minutes? Does it mean we have, you know, less than 10% errors the first week, right? Whatever that might be, go ahead and define that. Identifying our project risks, right? So we know the first risk, of course, should always be what happens if we miss this deadline, right? And start to put an owner to these risks. Who's going to be in charge of making sure that this risk doesn't become a risk, right? That we can actually plan for it. And then what is that plan going to look like? I won't read through all of these for you guys. The other big one I mentioned earlier is there tends to be code freezes, right, with IT teams as we get towards the end of the year or end of the quarters. So just things you want to make sure that you're taking in account and absolutely putting in your timeline. And talk to your IT or your Salesforce team now about this. Get it on their priority list, trust me.
Yeah.
Give them an extra Christmas present, like go ahead and give them a little gift, some cookies, something. Not that I've been there to try to get a migration going.
Chocolate helps.
Chocolate helps. Chocolate helps.
We are not above bribery by all means. All right, so this is that key step I was talking about. So those of you may or may not have heard the term RACI before, and this is something that we use often. So RACI just means who is responsible for doing this, right? So who's going to be doing the actual work, right? So these are your worker bees. This is typically more than one person, or it could be a single person. Who is accountable? So to Masha's statement earlier, joint accountability is no accountability. So we 100% recommend that there is, to use another quote from Colby, one throat to choke, right? When it comes down to it, who's accountable if this doesn't get done, right? Who needs to be consulted with, right? So what are your key stakeholders that need to be included in the design or the conversations or the discovery for this task? And then who should we just inform, right? So this could be some executives, maybe we need to just give them some updates along the way. This could be like a change management person within your organization, right? Here are going to be the changes that are going to happen and working with them. Down the description, you'll see there's a few different things. And I believe there's even a second slide on just project tasks. This by no means is exhaustive. So there will most likely be more tasks that need to happen. And you'll see I did leave this kind of high level just because, you know, depending on your organization, if you have multiple like Salesforce sandbox instances, for example, that you need to test in, like a pre-prod, a QA, a dev, you know, I've worked with some organizations that have 3 testing environments before you can push to production. So knowing these things ahead of time, planning for them, putting them in as tasks. I don't know about you guys, but I'm super type A, and if I don't have a checklist, I'm not going to remember it. So the more you can put down here, the better by all means. And then that change management plan. So start to work on this as early as possible, even if it's not fully fleshed out, just starting to identify. And when I talk about identifying changes, think about it from the end user's point of view, right? How will this affect field marketing? How will this affect our sales team? What does this mean for marketing ops and how they need to manage this or look for those errors, those types of things, right? How does it affect just your marketing users in general, right? Do we change any processes as a part of this that they then need to roll out? So really think through it and start to identify what are those things, because as you're working through this, I promise you'll be like, ooh, we have to do this a different way now too, and oh, this. So if you just start documenting along the way, it's going to be extremely helpful.
I feel like that's how it always happens. Like 5 things, it's like a fractal. It keeps on going. You discover more and more things as you go through.
Yes, that checklist that just keeps getting bigger and bigger to-do list as opposed to like smaller from you actually marking things off.
Exactly.
Yes. And then lastly, just put together a timeline. I find, especially with big projects like this, having a timeline really helps set the expectation throughout the rest of the organization. Not only does it let them know what is going to be live or when it's going to be live, but it starts to give them a little bit of detail of why it can't be done sooner, right? We've all heard it, like, oh, it's just one change to the email. You can do that like in 10 minutes, right? So part of this is setting that expectation for them of, we have to do these steps, right? We have to build in sandbox, we have to build in production, we have to test, we have to UAT, we have to do these things. So putting that on a timeline really kind of helps them see it visually as well. I think that was my last slide. Yes.
Yeah, that was it.
Awesome. Well, we have had a ton of great questions throughout the session. I appreciate everybody staying on and staying engaged. So before we hop off here, does anyone else have any additional questions? If not, I have a question for Bill and Steph, but I wanted to go ahead and ask the floor first. Jeopardy music. Doo, doo, doo. All right. Well, from a closing perspective, Bill and Steph, what would be like, someone comes up to you and they're like, I'm freaking out about this, or I can't, I'm not, I'm not really explaining this in a way to really get people to understand the timeline. What would be your advice? Like your first thing of advice, with someone who is responsible for this migration, what would you say?
Well, from my perspective, I usually go for the reality of the worst case scenario, which is that, we might not, the integration could potentially fail at any moment after February 1st without support from Oracle. And that to me is scary enough to instill a sense of urgency typically. That's what I would start with, and you just really cover the fact that this is probably going to be at least several weeks of work, if not months. So now is the time to really get started on it, so that you're not brushing up against that deadline. And again, just to be clear, it's not magically going to just stop working February 1st. It's just support's going to end, but it could end. The native integration could stop working at any point after that. So why risk it?
Yes, absolutely. I would say the same thing, but the only other thing that I would add really is it's gonna take a while, and there's a lot of steps, and integration is not something, as we all know, right, that should be taken lightly. And so I personally would like to take my time, make sure it gets done right, and have some time when we can trial and error it, right? We can figure it out, we can see what works, what doesn't work, see if there's some additional tweaks or maybe some use cases that we didn't think about. While to Bill's point, we still have a working integration, right? We're not up against the wall saying, oh, we just got to get these leads over, and then we're doing manual Excel work every single day. And if you're the security team, close your ears, right? That PII of manually passing that over.
I have one more thing actually, and that is, any of you watching might have integration problems you're experiencing today, and we've found that a lot of the problems that we've had, that our clients have experienced, were resolved with the new integration app. But that's another thing to consider is, do you have some nagging problems that you've been dealing with anyway? This could solve those problems, and at least this process should be able to solve those problems. So this might be just your opportunity to do it, see it as a positive thing.
Awesome. Yes. Glass half empty to glass half full. Love it. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining, Bill, Stephanie. This was great. As I said, we will be sending out the deck and the link to the blog. If you guys have any other questions, if you want to talk to us, let us know in the follow-up email. We'll give you guys an opportunity, and we are more than happy to help answer your questions around the integration. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. Bye.
Bye, y'all. Thank you.
Bye.